911, what's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency?
Be advised, Car 4 has control of the pursuit. Proceed with caution.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Crime Door. So good to see all of you. I have missed you. Thank you, Beach Fairy. I am feeling better. Hello, Rescue All the Dogs. Hey, Jill. How are you? Hey, Boston. Always good to see you. Hey, Sierra.
Apple.com should be able to answer that question and more.
Oh, good Lord. Don't listen to Siri, you guys. Hello, CJK. How are you? Good to see you. Hey, Deb. How are you, my dear? It's so good to see you as well. I have missed you. Happy birthday and a shout out to my dear friend and content creator that we all love, but Aspen Connor's birthday is today. So happy birthday, Aspen, wherever you are, my dear. Hey, Lisa. Thank you for being here. Good to see you. Hey, Jill. How are you? Hey, Colette. Hey, Tech Death, my dear. How are you? I never, ever get tired of your intro. I could listen to that. I just love that intro so much. So much. Hey, Shane. How are you? Good to see you. I hope everybody's doing well this Thursday night. Hey, Derek. Welcome, my dear. How are you? Always good to have you in the house. Always. Hey, Robin. Thank you for coming. Hey, Mandy. Good to see you. Hey, Stephanie. Missed you. How are you? So good to see you. I just love it. I so love it. It's just, I don't find it sad. I find it, I just find it to be super deep. I just love it. Thank you so much for sharing it with me and allowing me to use it. I can't thank you enough. Oh, yeah, CJK, those are, I understand those. Hey, Dave, how are you? I thought I was going to be cold because it's always cold in my office, and it's not. Right now I'm very warm, so I'm going to flip on my fan. I don't need to start coughing because I get hot. So there we go. So yeah, sorry about Tuesday, guys. I was all set. I had the show all prepared, everything. And yeah, it just didn't happen. The weather here has been really kind of odd. And my allergies for whatever reason have been absolutely nightmarish this spring and summer. And I actually take Singular every night for my part of my asthma regime. And it's one of the strongest, what am I trying to say? Prescription medications you can take for allergy stuff. And I don't know, it's just been weird. So, yeah, I'm over it for sure. Oh, Stephanie, thanks. Just kind of threw it on today. This is what you get. But yes, Dave, I am feeling a lot better. Hey, Ruckus. Hey, my dear, how are you? Oh, I'm so glad you stopped by. I was thinking about you today. I watched your upload. I've been watching all of your uploads from Evansdale, and oh my God, you guys are killing it out there. The drone footage alone has been such an eye-opener to so many people. I had a long conversation with Maria today. I hadn't talked to her for a while, and we caught up. And man, we were talking about the drone footage and how important it is for people who don't know the area. And you can listen to all the descriptions, and you can look at maps, and you can look at pictures, but it does not give it justice until you see it live, like on a drone where you're walking through it, and it really puts it into perspective. So hats off to you guys, my dear. You're, like I said, you're killing it out there, and I so appreciate everything that you're doing for Evansdale, because my heart breaks for Drew and his family and for Lyric's family, because 11 years and they don't have justice, and it's not fair. Their case didn't even garner a tenth or even less than that of the attention that Delphi has. And I think there needs to be some pressure put on law enforcement in this case to release some of the information at this point, 11 years out, because they've released nothing on Evansdale. And I just can't imagine what the heck is going on there. But yeah, you guys are doing bang up job. Thank you so much for taking care of our national treasure. He actually is near and dear to my heart like no other. He stepped up without even being asked last fall when I found myself in the hospital and then in intensive care with an undiagnosed heart condition that I didn't even know I had. And when I got out of the hospital, he actually just jumped in and said, let me cover your show for you for as long as you need. And he did some shows and hosted my shows. I mean, Steve is like the best person. And I'm so glad you two were together. It just, his morning watch last night was hilarious. Learned a lot about you. And like I said, I just can't say enough about both of you. You guys are my new heroes for sure. So not that you weren't already before, but I think that you both bring something super special to this genre and especially to these communities. And a lot of people talk badly about law enforcement, and they get a bad rap, and especially online as well. You guys are the real deal. You are, you guys and Cop Facts, you're all the real deal. You guys have my complete respect and devotion, because I know that your hearts are exactly where they should be in these cases, and you are doing the work. And I appreciate it. And I know everybody out there appreciates you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Dave, be careful out there tonight. Please. Ruckus is from Boston, and I love his accent, and I love to listen to him talk. I could listen to him talk forever. And one of the things I like so much about Ruckus and his show and his channel is that he shoots straight from the hip, guys. He doesn't pull no airs. He's not there to put on some fake, show or whatever. He tells you like it is. And if you don't like it, so be it, because he's just a truth teller in my opinion. And when we are talking about true crime and talking about all these cases that we cover, the truth is what we're after. At least that's why I'm here. It's not about me. It's not about this channel. It's not about any of that. It's about seeking and finding the truth in cases. And the evidence leads us to the truth. You have to believe that. You have to go there. You have to speak it. You have to believe it. And I have learned so much this past week. When I wasn't feeling good, I was catching up, watching some of my favorite YouTubers, listening to some documentaries. I've been doing a lot of research on my serial killer content that I'm going to start putting out tonight. We're going to go over the Grim Sleeper. But there's some stuff I wanted to talk about first, and this was part of it. Because what Steve and Ruckus are out there doing, boots on the ground work, and my dear and good friend, close dear friend, Gonzo, does the same thing. Boots on the ground work, where you're going to these crime scenes and you're going into these neighborhoods and putting everything on the line to try to help, whether it be in live searches or searches on your own time, or trying to dig up evidence, talking to people, becoming a part of their community. That is so important and so needed. And like I said, my hats go off to these guys. And Corgi Mama, thank you so much. You guys are so sweet. I have the best community out there. I swear, you guys are amazing. So yeah, I wanted to say that, been keeping an eye on them. I know that they're there. I think we all have in the back of our minds, we realize that there's a killer that has not been caught. And I feel like this person is right there with them, hiding in plain sight. I know there's been speculation that this person has died, or that something happened and they moved on or whatever. And I don't believe that for 1 minute. I believe they're there, similar to how Richard Allen was hiding in Delphi for all these years. So it's not, yeah, these guys are law enforcement and yeah, they're retired or whatever, but it's still an element of danger, that's out there. So I'm glad they're together and I'm glad they're checking in with us to let us know how they're doing and that they're okay. So yeah, Deb, for sure. Check yourself for ticks, for ticks. When I saw you guys walking through the brush this afternoon, I was yelling at my television saying, Ruckus, Steve, you're going to end up with poison ivy. I saw poison ivy all around you when you guys were walking through those woods. So I was hoping, please tell me they're not in shorts and they have on long pants and long sleeve shirts. But yeah, make sure you guys check yourselves for ticks because they're really bad this year. And with all the rain we've had and stuff, they definitely have been like really bad. What else was I going to say about that? I think that was pretty much it. It's such a beautiful area. Not only the Seven Bridges area that they filmed today, but the Angel Park. I mean, when you look at where those girls were that day and how they basically were led into a web, as far as I'm concerned, it's like they walked into this web and they had no idea that this monster was there and was going to grab them, and they had no way to go. There was nowhere for them to get away. And so it takes the beauty of such a beautiful setting and turns it into a nightmare. So yeah, it's very eye-opening. I so appreciate it. Hey, Thistle, so good to see you. Oh, Melissa, that's not good. With Lyme disease running rampant out there, that is certainly not good to hear, but totally get it and totally understand. You just have to be diligent when you're out there. So let's see. The next thing that I wanted to talk about with you guys, there's two things before we delve into the actual true content for tonight. One of them is, I am sure that you guys have, hey Ray, how are you, my dear? Always keeping track of me. I love it. Thank you so. No, Betsy, you are totally fine. You don't need to go to the office. You get a pass for being late. You're not late anyway. But yeah, very, very good, Dave. I'm sure they did as well. So I watched one of my favorite, hold on a second. Oh, Colette, I'm so sorry to hear that. Chemo is no fun. No fun at all. God bless you. My heart goes out for anyone who's going through chemotherapy. Watching my 4-year-old go through it was enough all the years ago. And, they've improved it so much now. They have these wonderful drugs they can give you for nausea and stuff like that they didn't have too much back when he was taking it. So, but yeah, I wish you well. So one of my favorite YouTubers, you guys, and he's one of my favorite authors on true crime. He's just I think he's a really good resource. Now, with that being said, a lot of people, I think it's a two-sided coin. There's people who love him, and then there's people who just don't like him at all. And I'm talking about Ken Maines. And another reason, again, that I love Ken Maines is because he's a straight shooter from the hip guy. He doesn't put on airs. What you see is what you get. He believes in the truth. He believes in, behaving in a certain way and an upstanding. You know, he doesn't just blatantly support law enforcement. You know, just like whatever they do is fine and always okay, because he knows that that's not true. And he has a good history in law enforcement, and he, you know, worked on so many different things, many cases and different types of undercover work and so on and so forth. And I think that that really gives a different kind of a perspective than just a regular beat cop, that's all they do their whole career. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with the officers that put that uniform on every day and then just, you know, that's just the beat cop that just drives in the car, works the neighborhoods. But yeah, Ken is, you know, he's out there now trying to educate and help on cold cases. And Lord knows there are enough cold cases out there that need help. And if I was leading a police force anywhere that had all these open cases, I would want him on my team to help look into them. He is, I just can't, like I said, can't say enough about him. Well, anyway, he always laughs, or he always makes me laugh, because when he starts talking, he always digresses and goes into some other topic that he didn't necessarily mean to, and it reminds me of me, because I'm the same way. And I was like, I think that's one thing that I love about him so much, is that I see a lot of myself in him. I know, I love it. I digress. He just makes me laugh. But anyway, he put out a video where he is talking about, he was talking about the Brian Kohberger case, and it's a recent one. And in that video, he also talks about truth and finding the truth and what that means in a case, and the people who have these preconceived notions of how they feel a case is going and who they think is responsible. And he talks about this in a way that really woke me up, because I think it speaks to a number of different communities within the true crime genre, Delphi being one, and most definitely the Idaho murders case is another. I also see it in the Summer Wells community and some other cases as well. But he was talking about people who, once the evidence comes out and they've named a suspect, you have all of these people refusing to believe what's being told to them. And he talks about them. And he talks about how, you know, it's okay to believe what you believe. But one of the things that he gave as an analysis that I love, he talks about staying in town when you, with your thinking, when you're examining a case and you're kind of deep diving it and trying to find out all you can about it. You want to read all the articles. You want to listen to all of the news accounts. You want to find any interviews with the family of the victims, or you know, any of the analysis of the victimology, whatever. He compares it to staying in town and not leaving your town and going to crazy town. I'm not kidding you guys. When I heard that analysis, I'm like, oh, I'm latching on to that, because that is so how I feel about Delphi and about some of these cases, because it is a difference between town and crazy town. And you guys have to admit it. I mean, some of this stuff is so crazy that people come up with and talk about and just go off on. It's crazy. And his point was, especially after evidence has been shown. And the reason he did his video was because he had friends and family members asking him if they thought that the Idaho murders case was a slam dunk. And hey, Frank Meister, how are you? And he said, absolutely not. There are no slam dunk cases ever. He reminded everyone of O.J. Simpson. Everybody thought that, O.J. Simpson was guilty. Well, not everyone, but, the majority of the public thought he was guilty. So when he was acquitted, people went nuts. People were like, what the heck? How can that possibly be? Again, and Ken said, this is not about winning or losing. This is about finding the truth. It's not about winning your case. It's about finding the truth. Is this person guilty of what they've been arrested for, or are they not? And if they're not guilty, then so be it. But you're ultimately looking for the truth in these cases, not some narrative that you feel needs to be followed, not some feeling you have or whatever. And as he put it, the crazy town people who absolutely refuse to look at the evidence that's been presented, whether it be in the PCA documents or once they actually get to court. So he did talk about that, and I just wanted to touch on it because I felt you guys definitely need to go watch his latest video if you haven't seen it, because it's definitely worth watching. It's about, I think, maybe a half hour is all it is, but it's definitely worth a good listen because he gives us great information in it. And when I first started my channel, about 4 months into it, I wanted to have Ken on. I wanted to see if he would come on and let me interview him. And I emailed him, and I thought, God, I didn't even have I think I had 1,000. I did have 1,000 subscribers by then. I think I was over maybe 1,500, somewhere around there. And he emailed me back. It surprised me. I was so surprised because I knew, this guy, he's got TV shows he works on. He writes books. He consults on cases. And I knew that the chance of me actually getting him to come on my show was going to be really mute. I mean, I was like, a brand new YouTuber, for God's sakes. But he answered me, and he told me that he would love to have come on my show, but that he couldn't because he was under contract with networks. And when you're under contract, you're not allowed to do certain things. And so I totally understood that. And he told me he was going to keep an eye on my channel, keep an eye on how, I was doing. He had looked at some of my content and thought that I was doing really good work. And that was just 4 months into it. So that made me feel really good about him, hearing that from him about myself and what I was trying to do. So anyway, hats off to Ken Maines. Go watch his newest video. I've made it a point on this channel to not badger and beat up other YouTubers. There have been many that I would have liked to have called out and ranted and raved about, and I've not done that. I have made I've made live streams where I've talked about topics that I thought should be pointed at their faces, and hopefully open their ears. I have done that. So I've done it in a roundabout way. But like I told you, I've always felt like I didn't and shouldn't be the YouTube police. This week, I'm changing my mind on one particular YouTuber. And the only reason I'm even going to bring this up and we're going to talk about it is because it's everywhere. And what this person has done is beyond disgusting. It's beyond horrific. It's beyond anything that anybody that covers true crime and all of it can even fathom. I mean, we've got Brian Enton tweeting about it. We've got ex-family, or not ex, but I mean family members of the deceased people in all of these cases. Yeah, there are two, Stephanie. You're right. There are two, but I'm thinking of one in particular. And I'm just here to tell you, if you guys, because this is where it's at, the YouTubers are bad enough with what they've done. But anybody who paid to see this stuff, those are the people that you have to be afraid of. I've always said it's not so much the messenger that you have to be afraid of. It's the people the followers, the people who will blindly follow people that they know in their heart are evil, disgusting, and wrong. And I'm going to go out there and put that. I don't care if this offends you, then you can turn me off. You can do whatever, because this is it, you guys. Who in the hell goes out there and obtains autopsy photos of an 11-year-old child and then asks their Patreon members to pay to see them? And this particular YouTuber did it, Zav Girl. And this person I've never watched her. I have heard of her, and I have heard of her channel. I am not subscribed to her. She has over 88,000 subscribers, which says enough. She's big enough that, I mean, she's huge. She gets tons of views on everything she puts out. And this woman needs to be, I mean, she was taken off of Patreon, thank God. Right before I came on and I was looking for some news, Patreon kicked her off. And they were like, she broke our terms of service. And it is so very sad what they have done to this family. The pain that they have caused to a family of a child that has died. I just can't say enough about it. This, as far as stepping over the line, so disgusting. If you guys are not familiar, just go read the news. Don't go to her channel. Don't give her any views. And if you're subscribed to this person, I highly recommend you reevaluate yourself as to why you would continue to support someone that does this kind of behavior. And she can absolutely, now that she's been called out for it, she's giving all kinds of excuses that she didn't do it for money. This was all a misunderstanding. No, there's no misunderstanding here. She did it. And I'm just like, I just can't, like I said, I can't get over it. And I hope, upon hope, that YouTube clamps down on her. And I agree with you, Tech Death. Who would want to see those? Why would anyone want to see brutality to a child? An autopsy, you guys, is brutal. If you don't know and have never seen one, it's brutal. And to know that that's happening to a child is just beyond me, let alone everything else. And yeah, so I had to yeah. Boston, like I said, there are some really, really sick people out there that get their morbid curiosity gets the best of them. And Maria and I were talking about it today, because the other thing that I'm going to put out there is that I'm going to say one more thing about YouTube and then I'm done. But my very dear friend and good friend, Grismatically Clever, who is a moderator on my channel and has been with me since day one, someone in the community and someone who lives in Delphi, a Delphi local, actually had the gall to call him the N-word. And not only once, but more than once. And I am appalled. I'm disgusted. I'm just beyond not shocked, but disgusted by behavior. Sorry, Frank. um, and Grizz is a good person. He's a good guy, and he doesn't deserve that treatment. And for people's racism to come out, that's how it happens. These people, it's like I was telling Maria when we were talking today. You can try and hide it all you want to, and then sometimes something happens, and you might end up into a heated discussion with someone or a very emotional discussion, and something slips or someone says something, and boom, there you have it. And you're like, wow, I never would have ever imagined. What did you just say? And that's exactly how this stuff happens. And then you peel the layer off and you see the real person. You see the person that they've hidden, that they're trying to hide how they truly believe and how they truly feel. And they do walk among us, racists, people who believe it's okay to think less of someone simply because of their skin color or their sex or their sexual orientation or their religion. I mean, I'm just sick of it, you guys. It's everywhere and it's constant. And to have it seep over into someone that I care about, that's the bottom line. I have to say something. I have to stand up and call it out. So whoever this pit bull person is, I have no use for you either. So Grizz, if you're out there and you're listening, please know that I still think you're absolutely amazing and wonderful. And please don't let this kind of behavior keep you away from YouTube, because you do really great content and you're a great person and you're a great dad, a really great dad. But again, we talk about it all the time that, people hide behind these things and they pretend to be whatever, and they do it for whatever their sick reasons are. I don't know what their sick reasons are. But it's, just beware, you guys. Be aware and be diligent in who you choose to support, who you choose to watch, and make sure that you are not the problem. Make sure you're not the follower that follows people blindly, even though they're out there doing this kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox and I'm sorry. I just had to bring all that out because it was really weighing heavy on me. Yeah, it just drives, like I said, it just drives me nuts. I mean, they don't have a right to behave this way. And they certainly don't have a right to do it in the manner in which they do. And yeah, there's free speech out there, but thank you, Frank Meister. Oh, Frank Meister, thank you. I knew you'd stand up for Grizz. I knew it. No matter what, I knew that about you. Frank's a great guy. He's a good person. His heart is in the right place. And that word should never be used. And I'm just, it's just like, I don't know. I just get so mad sometimes. And I'm like, I try to keep the drama and stuff away from the channel because I don't want to take away from the seriousness of what we talk about here and what I report to you guys. But man, when people start behaving like this and then try to hide behind it, it's just pathetically sick. So yeah, you just don't treat people like that. Good answer, Shane. And it's just like, you take your, if you're a man, just put it this way. imagine this, because I think Ken talked about this on his live or on his video. You take your daughter. He took his 10-year-old daughter with him somewhere to a restaurant, and they were sitting in a booth, and there were some young men, adult males, 20s, whatever, sitting behind them. And they were drunk and drinking or whatever. And they all of a sudden, they started talking about sex, and they were talking about it in a very open and blatant way, knowing there was a 10-year-old girl sitting directly behind them. And it's like, common sense is what Ken called it. Where is the common sense in the world? There is none. You don't do that. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know who has compared Grizz to Anthony Greeno, but I'm not talking about Anthony Greeno, and I don't know if that's what was being done or not, but Grizzmatically is nothing like Anthony Greeno. And Grizz is an amazing person. So yeah. Great description, Frank. I like that description. So yeah, that's where I am with that, and we'll move on. There wasn't much going on in Delphi this week. I was trying to keep track of any new developments or anything new. One of the things that I did see is there was some content that was put out regarding the conservation officer. And the conservation officer that they were speaking about is not the one that was mentioned in the document dump. So I'm not sure if this conservation officer gave it to, turned it over to someone else, or what's going on there. So I'm, I just have to, I'm going to have to deep dive more on that one and try to figure out what's going on here. Because the content I thought was good, but then I realized, well, that's not the same guy. So is this content good? Is it the, it's just crazy. So, no kidding, Joan. I wondered the same thing. I was wondering how this did not break HIPAA's rules. And I mean, the family could still sue her civilly. Or both of them, because there are two of the content creators. And I was thinking about that with the HIPAA, and where would they have gotten access to minors' autopsy photographs? So yeah, I was quite concerned about that as well. Yeah, Shane, it's going to be quiet at least until something big happens. I think that I think Frank's right. I think there's going to be a competency hearing soon. And I think that that's what we will see next. And, but I think it's interesting because if he's gone back to being a normal guy and just being himself, which the warden said he had, I don't think there's anything to have a hearing on. But I wish them well. I hope they do, so that there's nothing that can be said on appeal that they didn't check out because of his behavior. So I think and I agree with you, Stephanie. I agree wholeheartedly. The fact that John Bonet's autopsy photos are out there on the internet is sickening to me. The photos of her body in the garrote and all of that, to me, it's just, there's just certain things that we as the public don't have the right to, even though we think we do. Just because we think we should have doesn't make it right. If that was your child, you guys, how would you feel? That's what you have to stop and ask yourself. Would you want everybody in the world to have access to that? Thistle says, I think it's a rant for my hubby and myself and my 10-year-old daughter were at a supermarket when these young thugs started throwing the outside displays of plants, almost hitting my daughter. Oh my gosh. It's just behavior like that. I just don't know what's happening in our world anymore. It is very concerning, and it's very sad for sure. I am shocked as well, Beach Fairy. I cannot believe she was able to access them. I know it's a solved case, and why would she do that? And when exactly. This hurts the genre. It hurts us when we, when we have gone to try to find information or get information on cases, and we want to know why law enforcement wants to keep things close to the vest. This is why law enforcement wants to keep things close to the vest. It's because of people like this that are out there, sensationalizing and trying to make a living off of the backs of dead children is I just can't, like I said. I have no words for that kind of behavior. True Crime Garage dropped a double Delphi, and you guys do need to listen to it. Delphi, I can't say enough about TCG. I love them. Nick and the captain do a fantastic job, and they do a fantastic job on Delphi. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And she's made it everywhere. She's everywhere. She's on the net. They are talking about her on Law and Crime Network. They think what she has done is the most disgusting behavior, and I hope that it absolutely ends up with the absolute fall of her 88,000 follower channel on YouTube. I would like to see her gone. We don't need people like this pretending I don't think we need this kind of content out there that's hurting families. And you're right, Boston. Part of the horror of this is that the sick people out there that prey on this kind of stuff is going to get a hold of it, and they'll sell it and whatever. And again, all you have to do is lay down at night with your head on your pillow and think, wow, what if that was my child? And yeah, because when Brian Enton goes after you, something's up, because I like him and he's a good reporter, and he is on the warpath, and it's all over Twitter. I mean, Twitter is not happy with what's gone on there. So, and rightfully so. Like I said, we can't stand by and do nothing. This is how evil prevails in this world, is to just keep quiet and not say anything. And it's just sad. But I'm glad you guys are all here, and I'm going to talk to you guys tonight about a serial killer. And I'm not sure how many of you may have heard about him, the Grim Sleeper. And his name was Lonnie David Franklin Jr. And he is now deceased, but he was born in 1952, and he passed away in March of 2020 on death row. And he's better known as the Grim Sleeper, and he was a serial killer. He is responsible for at least 10 murders and one attempted murder in California in Los Angeles between the years of 1984 to 2007. He was also convicted for rape and sexual violence in his lifetime. He earned his nickname when he appeared to have taken a 14-year break from his crimes from 1988 to 2002. And I think the sad thing about this man's story and his victims is that these individuals, and hold on a second, because I want to put something up here on the screen, so just give me a minute. Where are we? Mm-hmm. Hang on, guys. Why is my photo? Oh, I know why. Hang on. Video slides, present slides. No. There it is. I'm like, where are you? So how do you go from this smiling little person to this killer? But this is him. This is Lonnie David Franklin Jr. When he was arrested in Los Angeles. So in July of 2010, he was arrested as a suspect after many delays in these crimes, and his trial began in February of 2016, so 6 years later. So that tells you sometimes how long it can take to get these cases to trial, you guys. On May 5th, 2016, he was convicted of killing 9 women and 1 teenage girl. On June 6th of 2016, he was recommended for the death penalty. And he was sentenced to die on August 10th of 2016 for each of his 10 victims that was named in his verdict. And on March 28th of 2020, he was found dead in his cell at San Quentin State Prison. He grew up in South Central Los Angeles. He was born in 1952. He was married and had 2 children. He was given a dishonorable discharge from the United States Army in July of 1975 after being released from prison for his conviction of gang raping a 17-year-old girl in Stuttgart, West Germany. And that happened in April of 1974. Franklin and 2 other servicemen stationed in Stuttgart stopped to ask directions from the teenager and offered her a ride home. When she accepted it, they put a knife to her throat, drove her to a field, and repeatedly sexually assaulted her. And she was able to feign interest in Franklin and asked for his phone number, by which police identified him. During the sexual assault, photographs were taken by these men, and as Franklin did later with the women that he sexually assaulted and murdered. In 1989, Lonnie Franklin was convicted of 2 charges of theft and 1 charge, a misdemeanor of assault, and 1 charge of battery. He served one only time for the theft, not on the assault or battery charges. In the mid-1980s, the Los Angeles Police Department did not have a good reputation, and they were being looked at as, not very good at their jobs. And they became aware of someone, an apparent serial killer, that was targeting Black women who were chronic drug users and street sex workers in South Central LA. And South Central LA, you got to remember, it has its own set of problems. But when you look at the South Central LA neighborhoods, and I was going to show you this. Hold on. If I can get my mouse to work. Let's move him out of the way. This is Lonnie's house. And this is Lonnie's house after his arrest. And there's garbage and stuff all over the front lawn. He had back here, at one time, he had a camper. And that is where he was taking these women and committing the murders and assaulting them. Was happening here on his own property. He didn't like people in his house. We'll get into that. But yeah, this is where he lived. And a couple of his victims who survived remember the greenhouse. It was something that was vivid in their memories. So they dubbed the killer the South Side Slayer at the time, back in the 80s. And he was believed to be responsible for stabbing and strangling at least 13 women between 1983 and late 1985. And at one point, the murders were colloquially known as the Strawberry Murders. And strawberry was a slang slang word being used for a woman who would exchange sex for drugs. In September of 1985, the Los Angeles Police Department described the case at a press conference and asked for tips from the public. And following this press conference, the Los Angeles Police Department was heavily criticized for their failure to alert the South Central community to the possibility of a serial killer earlier, because they knew and they didn't tell anybody. Activist Margaret Prescott and another community activist held weekly protests outside the LAPD headquarters in an effort to pressure them into forming a task force to investigate these murders. Now you have to ask yourself, why did they have to do that? Why would the LAPD not want a task force immediately? I guarantee you, if this was happening in the high-end Brentwood district, which is where Nicole Brown Smith was attacked and ultimately unlived, or if you would go into, if this was happening in the Hollywood Hills or somewhere in Hollywood, there would have been a task force immediately. But because this was happening in South Central LA, and these were so-called street workers, sex workers, and they had an addiction to crack cocaine or to other drugs, they were marginalized individuals, and they didn't care. They simply didn't care. And because of that, they allowed a serial killer to hunt in this neighborhood for all of these years. Decades. There was, at the same time, there was the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, was also active during this period of time in the late 70s. And he was targeting women in the upscale areas of LA and San Francisco, and they had a task force. So that right there shows you, the difference. Margaret accused the Los Angeles Police Department of indifference to the deaths of these women who were poor, they were Black, drug users, and sex workers. And the police department came out and denied that, of course. They weren't going to admit to that. In January of 1986, 15 murders had been linked to this case alone. And more detectives were added to the joint LAPD, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department investigation team, which had become known as the Southside Slayer Task Force by then. But by 1986, the case was still under investigation. Prescott formalized her group of activists as a community group called the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders, and in March of 1986 pressured the Los Angeles City Council to increase the reward money that they were offering for information on the killings from $10,000 to $25,000. This is a picture of him in court. I thought I had, this was a picture of him being interrogated, and this is a picture of some of the women, of all the missing women and the murdered women. I swore I had another picture. Weird. It's not the one I wanted. I'm going to keep this one up. Sorry, guys. Anyway, let's put this up here and move this one here. There we go. All right. So yeah, they increased the reward fund from $10,000 to $25,000. Wow. By late 1996, conflicting modus operandi and suspect descriptions caused the investigations and investigators to doubt their original theory of a single killer being responsible for all of the murders. Evidence actually suggested that several serial killers, possibly 4 or more, were actually operating in South Los Angeles at the time. The Southside Slayer Task Force began to be wound down in 1987 because of the lack of results relative to the expense and manpower being used. You got to remember, these task force really cost a ton of money to operate. And the reason is because it's bodies and you're paying salaries. And that's where the money comes in these cases, when you're talking about money and what it takes to investigate. And when you have so many people who are working on a case and putting in overtime, long hours, that can be very, very expensive. When you're talking about a county like Carroll in Delphi versus a city of Los Angeles, whose county is humongous, their operating budget is bigger than some states. Yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, they shut down the task force in 1987. The task force commander was Lieutenant John Zorn, and he told the LA Times that in December of 87 that the flow of clues is almost non-existent at this point in these cases. Nobody was missing them. Nobody was wanting to talk about them. And not only that, but people were afraid of him, of this person. People lived in fear in this community because they didn't know who this was, who was doing this. And Lonnie actually had a pretty decent reputation. Over the following years, it was found that there was a serial killer, Lewis Crane, who committed at least 2 of the so-called Southside Slayer murders, and serial killers Michael Hughes, Daniel Lee Siebert, Chester Turner, and Ivan Hill committed at least 1 each in this area. In addition, some of the murders may have been committed individually by the women's pimps or clients and unrelated to any serial killer is what was being reported. The murders of Judith Simpson, Cynthia Walker, and LaTanya Johnson, all committed with a 9mm pistol in late 1988, were also investigated by the Southside Slayer Task Force. Sheriff's Deputy Ricky Ross was arrested for these murders after being found with drugs and a sex worker in a vehicle that had a rusted 9mm Beretta semi-automatic pistol in the trunk. Ross was charged with the murders after his gun was forensically linked by the LAPD crime lab to the bullets from the murders. He was released after independent forensic analysis found it unlikely that Ross's gun was the murder weapon, and all 3 of those murders remain unsolved to this day. One particular group of killings which were linked by common elements, including the use of a .25 caliber firearm, remained unsolved and unaccounted for by any other known serial killer. And the first known murder in this series was the murder of Deborah Jackson in August of 1985, which was linked to the August 1986 murder of Henrietta Wright by forensic firearm examination. By 1987, there were 7 victims that had been linked to the same gun, all of whom had been shot in the chest at close range. 20 years later, the perpetrator of these crimes was dubbed the Grim Sleeper due to the fact that there was such a long period of time that transpired between the last homicide and the next homicide. In May of 2007, the slaying of Janicia Peters, 25, was linked through DNA analysis to at least 11 unsolved murders in Los Angeles, the first of which occurred in 1985. That same year, in secrecy, the LAPD formed the 800 Task Force, composed of 6 detectives and overseen by the Robbery Homicide Unit. After a 4-month investigation, LA Weekly investigative reporter Christine Pelisek broke the news of the task force existence, the link between Peter's killing and the earlier murders, and the silence of Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa and Police Chief William Bratton regarding the killer's existence. Villaraigosa and Bratton neither issued a press release nor warned the community about these killings. In some cases, LA Weekly was the first to inform the families that their own daughters had long been confirmed as victims of a serial killer. Now, to me, that is absolutely unconscionable that law enforcement knew this and didn't inform the families. In early September of 2008, Los Angeles officials announced that they were offering a $500,000 reward to help catch this killer. On November the 1st, the case was featured on the Fox program America's Most Wanted. And on February 25th of 2009, Bratton addressed the press for the first time regarding this case, at which time the police formally gave the killer the Grim Sleeper nickname chosen by LA Weekly. Bratton released a 911 call from the 1980s in which a man reported seeing a body being dumped by Franklin, giving a detailed description and license plate number of a van connected with the now closed Cosmopolitan Church. And in March of 2009, Pelisek conducted an extensive interview with Anitra Washington, the sole survivor of Franklin's attacks. Washington described him as a black man in his early 30s. He looked neat, tidy, kind of geeky. He wore a black polo shirt tucked into khaki trousers. She also described the interior and exterior of his vehicle. Law enforcement missed the opportunity to catch Franklin because his DNA was not previously collected. And in 2003, Franklin was convicted of a felony and was serving 3 years of supervised probation. In 2004, voters passed Proposition 69, which requires DNA to be collected from all felons and everyone arrested on certain specified charges. It also required that the expansion of the DNA database to occur. Authorities collected and sorted through thousands of DNA samples. While he was on this probation, Franklin's DNA was supposed to be entered into this system, but was not, as probation officers did not collect samples from people who were on unsupervised probation between November of 2004 and August of 2005. The probation department did not have the resources to collect these samples until August of 2005. Franklin was identified, at least in part, on familial DNA analysis. Police had found no exact match between DNA found at these crime scenes and any of the profiles in California's DNA profile database. So they searched the database for stored profiles that demonstrated sufficient similarities that would allow police to infer a familial relationship. And they found similar DNA belonging to Franklin's son, Christopher, who had been convicted of a felony weapons charge in 2008. Christopher was too young to have committed the murders back in the 80s. The murders, but the familial DNA match led investigators to look into his father. And they believed that Lonnie was likely the perpetrator. One undercover police officer pretended to be a waiter at a restaurant where Franklin ate, collecting dishes, silverware, glasses, and pizza crusts to obtain his DNA. And according to Cooley, detectives then used a piece of discarded pizza along with saliva found on the victims to establish the DNA match. And on July 7th of 2010, Lonnie Franklin was arrested. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office charged him with 10 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and special circumstances allegation of multiple murders. On December 16th of 2010, the LAPD released 180 photos of women that was found in Franklin's home after unsuccessful attempts to identify the individuals who were possibly additional victims. These people are not suspects. We don't even know if they're victims, but we do know this, they said, that Lonnie Franklin's reign of terror in the city of Los Angeles which spanned well over 20 years, culminating with almost a dozen murder victims, certainly needs to be investigated further, said the police chief at the time, Charlie Beck. In all, the investigators found over 1,000 photos and several hundred hours of video in his home. The images show mainly Black females of a wide age range, from teenagers to middle-aged and older, nude. Police believe Franklin took many of these pictures himself, which show both conscious and unconscious individuals dating back 30 years. The photos were released to the public in an effort to help identify who these women may have been. On November the 3rd of 2011, Reuters reported that the police were considering Franklin as a suspect in 6 more slayings. The police were investigating 2 of the 6 as potential victims killed during a 14-year lapse between an initial spate of grim sleeper murders that ended in 1988 and several more that began in 2002. Of the remaining 4 victims, 2 bodies were discovered in the 1980s and 2 were reported missing in 2005. But the remains of the other 2 were never found. And detectives said they linked Franklin to the 6 additional killings after reviewing hundreds of old case files and seeking the public's help in identifying a collection of over 180 photographs of women and girls that was found in his home. Franklin was charged with the murders and held without bail. He was never charged in the death of a suspected 11th victim, a Black man, a crime for which DNA evidence was not found. After a lengthy pretrial discovery and several delays, the trial opened on February 16th, 2016. So you can see right here how these cases that take on years and years and years to not be solved, how it takes so long to get them to trial. The case files are so huge and so heavy in discovery that it can delay things exponentially. Closing arguments began on May 2nd of 2016, and the jury began deliberating on May 4th of 2016, and then on May 5th, after nearly 3 months of trial and a day and a half of jury deliberation, he was convicted on all counts. His sentencing hearing began a week later on May 12th of 2016. And at this hearing, prosecutors presented evidence relating to 4 other victims they believed had been killed by him. And the 4 victims were not among the original set identified by DNA and ballistic evidence as grim sleeper victims. They had only been identified as such after his arrest. 3 victims, Sharon Alicia Dismuke, Inez Warren, and Georgia Mae Thompson, were identified as likely grim sleeper victims by task force officers investigating unsolved missing persons and homicide reports dating back to 1976. The 4th victim was Rolenia Morris, and she was identified from evidence that was found at Franklin's garage after his arrest. Her body has never been found. Prosecutors did not charge him with these murders for fear of delaying the trial even further. On June 6th of 2016, an LA County jury sentenced him to death. And on August 10th, the Superior Court sentenced him to on each count, naming the individual victims. Prosecutors said that they suspected that Lonnie Franklin's first victim was Sharon Alicia Dismuke, who was killed on January 15th, 1984, and his first confirmed victim was Deborah Jackson, whose murder occurred in August of 1985. Franklin apparently took a 14-year-old, or excuse me, took a 14-year hiatus after his last known crime in 1988. And his next confirmed murder occurred in 2002. As a result of this dormancy, he was nicknamed the Grim Sleeper. Investigators have stated that they believe it is very likely that there was yet other as yet unidentified victims during this time frame. As everyone knows, serial killers rarely go dormant, and when they do, it's extremely rare. The last confirmed murder was in January of 2007. All but one of his victims were Black females. And many of his victims were sex workers, and Franklin was known to have frequent contact with them. All of his victims were found outdoors, often dumped in alleys a short distance from his downtown Los Angeles area, from where he lived. And he shot all of his victims with a .25 caliber handgun. He was known to have taken many photographs of these women naked and kept the records in his garage. And they put together, there is a comprehensive list of all of the known and suspected victims of him. And it's an interesting list. There have been many TV shows and film and television movies made about him. But on March 28th of 2020, he was found dead in his prison cell at San Quentin prison in Los Angeles, or in California. His cause of death was pending the results of an autopsy, but there were no signs of trauma to him. And so as of June of 2023, his cause of death and the results of the autopsy had not been publicly released. And I wonder if it was COVID related, is what I was thinking. But anyway, there was a movie, a Lifetime premiered a movie called The Grim Sleeper in 2014. There was a British filmmaker who created a documentary film called The Tales of the Grim Sleeper. The journalist that I spoke about, Christine Pelisek, she wrote a book, The Grim Sleeper, which was her account of the investigation into the case. Investigation Discovery covered him on their very first season, showing the show called The Face of Evil. And one of his victims, Anitria Margette, discussed her encounter with him in season 1, episode 7 of the A&E series I Survived a Serial Killer. And Law and Order LA did an episode called Bologna Creek, which really is similar to the Grim Sleeper case. But one of the reasons that I wanted to cover him and to cover his crimes was how everything was so overlooked about these women and what was happening to them. And when you look at the documentaries and you watch the films, you can see how these women just didn't seem to matter that much. It seemed like law enforcement had much more serious matters to contend with than the missing women that were dying at the hands of this man. And he was well liked in the community. He did a lot of car repair. He did it right on the side of the street there in front of his house. He was helpful. His neighbors, there were still neighbors when he was arrested that didn't believe he had committed these crimes that he was being accused of. but he was a very violent person when it came to his interaction with women and his thoughts about them and everything. But yeah, what a very evil person. I guess when you're talking about, staring evil straight in the face, that is this man. Uh, his name is Lonnie David Franklin Jr., Stephanie, and he is known as the Grim Sleeper. He's a serial killer that operated from 1984 to 2007 in South Central LA. And the reason he was given the name the Grim Sleeper is because it appeared that he took a 14-year break from his crimes from 1988 to 2002, although investigators believe that there were other victims during this time. He was at one point on probation, so he might very well have tried to stay, out of trouble, so to speak, during that. But I don't know. Like I said, he was married. He had 2 children. His son, Christopher, was a very interesting individual as well. They looked at him a bit, wondering if he was part of this with his dad. He lived in the home with his father. His wife depicts him as a very domineering and volatile person. So again, here's another guy who was caught, who was committing these horrific crimes over decades and was caught because of familial DNA. And familial DNA has become a huge tool in law enforcement in this country. And yeah, it's it's something that I think we need to really be thankful for, because it's so easy to see how these guys, like I said, get under the radar in these marginalized victims and in these large cities where they have so much other crime going on. It's real easy for them to overlook it. And we've been talking this past summer and spring about Austin and what's going on in the city of Austin, and is there really truly a serial killer at work there? And many of us believe that it's very highly possible there is. And it's hard for police forces to want to admit that, because then if they come out and say that, they tend to feel like they're putting their communities in a sense of turmoil and fear. But I think the fear's there anyway, if you were to go into these communities and talk to them about it. So, my God, if you've got people dying out there like that, I would think you would want to put out there that be on the lookout for any strange, behavior from neighbors and people that appear to be out of place in your neighborhoods, if they're dumping bodies, in alleyways and so on, so that you could turn that information in. But that's just me. I mean, that's just kind of how I feel about that. I could be completely off base, but I'm going to continue, like I said, to cover the some of the serial killers series I want to do, where we can talk about. I saw that somebody posted earlier about, are serial killers born or do we create them? And I think that there's plenty of research out there that could be argued for either or. I definitely think that there's something that goes awry in their environment that may lead these men to this behavior, but I also think they're pre-wired for it in their brain as well, where they tend to be more violent people, and that predisposition to be violent bleeds over into what they actually end up being, the killers. You can look at their home lives. You can look at some of these individuals had horrific home lives. They were abused. They were, physically, sexually abused. Some of them were tortured. Some of them, were starved, and some of them just went through horrific things. Some of them were neglected. Some of them didn't have loving mothers that would help nurture them, and some of them had domineering moms who dominated them. And I think that when you look at these individuals, that's one of the things that you have to look at when you're looking at serial killers, is what was their home life like? Because if you look at Ted Bundy, for example, he had a wonderful home life. He had multiple siblings. He came from a good home. And I hate saying this way because this doesn't make a good home, but they were church-going people. Listening to him, his mother and father were hardworking, and his mom was a doting mother, and they were nurtured and cared for. So you wouldn't be able to say that there was something in his home life that would have caused him to turn out this way. Now, was it something else? Did he never feel like he quite, matched up to, his other siblings? But he was very intelligent, a very intelligent human being. And it's just interesting to see. I think that one of the things that we do when we look at John Douglas's books, because I've got a few of them, and he's written extensively on serial killers, and he talks about how a lot of these guys they feel completely isolated, and like they never feel like they fit in, like they're on the outside looking in. Even in their families, they don't feel like they belong, or they just don't feel right. And so what is it that causes that? I don't know if we ever will. Oh, I do too, Beach Fairy. I love his books. I think he's one of the greatest minds when it comes to delving into the criminal mind that we've had. He's given so much to true crime, and trying to really understand, if we can ever truly understand, what makes these guys tick. I don't think we can ever truly grasp it, because it's what they do is so beyond our understanding that it's just, I don't think we'll ever totally be able to comprehend why they do what they do. And we just need to know they're out there, and they are out there, and try to make ourselves as aware of that as possible, and protect ourselves the best we possibly can. I feel bad for these families and these victims, especially in this case with the Grim Sleeper, because, as I told you, for years, the Los Angeles Police Department's task force knew that these missing women were victims of the Grim Sleeper, and they never told the families. These families didn't know for years and years what happened to their child, even though the LAPD did. And I just find that horrific. Because it's so devastating to these families to not know. I can't imagine not knowing what happened to your child. And when you listen to the sisters and the aunts and the moms and the grandmothers talk about these women who went missing and ultimately were found murdered, is, yeah, they had issues in their lives, whether it be drugs or whether it be the fact that they were led to the streets as a sex worker. But that didn't mean they weren't loved, and that didn't mean that they didn't have a family that cared about them, brothers and sisters who wanted better for them. That's where it's at. I've said before, I don't think any of these women that live this kind of life chose it for themselves. I certainly wouldn't believe that that would be the case. But society is so quick to write them off and just say, well, they deserved it because, they're out there living on the street and, hooking up with guys they don't even know and all of this. But, do they really deserve it? To me, that's just a callous way to not face the problem and to not face the issue. That part does anger me a lot because it just re-victimizes them. And, nobody deserves to die that way. Nobody deserves to be tortured and brutalized by another human being. They just don't. It's just not something that anyone should deserve. And it is Beach Fairy. You are so right. These communities and these minorities, and especially Black women, it's horrific when you stop and think about how many go missing and how many disappear, and nobody bats an eye. I mean, they just don't talk about it. I mean, look at all I touched on it a couple months ago about all of the missing children in Cleveland. It's astronomical. I mean, there's so many children going missing there, and they're targeting it. They're saying it's runaway. And I don't buy that for a minute. There may be a portion of them that are runaways, but I don't believe all of them are runaways. Somebody is targeting kids, either sex trafficking or there's somebody out there that's a serial killer that is targeting kids and teenagers, because it's just ridiculous. And Cleveland doesn't want to address it. They don't want to own up to the fact that may be going on there. But we have a real problem in our country, and our judicial system is broken, but it's the only system that we have. And I wouldn't want it any other way. I don't think I would want any other judicial system in any other part of the world. And, we need to work at fixing that. The problems that we have in this country with racism, the problems we have in this country with people thinking they're better than someone else simply because of where they were born or who they were born to or the color of their skin or their religion or whatever, needs to stop. And I think the only way it's going to stop, it's going to take many, many decades of growth between families to change it. Because it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. This is stuff that's embedded in people's hearts. And yeah, the Indigenous women going missing is just as bad. And like I said, nobody wants to address it. And I guarantee you, if these were white middle-class American women that were going missing at this rate and dying and showing up brutalized in alleyways, there would be an outcry, and you would see it on every single channel. Ken Maines talks about it in his video that he put out that I spoke of earlier in the first part of my live stream. And he talked about how quickly the Idaho murders became viral on the airwaves, and how the media fed that and were the reason for that, because that case just blew up and it was everywhere. You couldn't stop. You couldn't turn on a TV or look at a Twitter feed or maybe even Facebook posts without seeing something about Idaho. Everybody was talking about it. And rightfully so. I'm not saying that it's not a case that should be talked about, but it just makes you wonder why those cases or some cases blow up that way and other cases don't. Would we still be talking about Idaho if they were for African American men and women? Would we still be talking about Idaho if they were Indigenous Americans that had died that horrible night? I don't think so. And that's just my true, honest opinion. Because those kinds of stories hit our airwaves and they make it a couple of news cycles, and then they just end up in the back burner, and people forget, and then we move on until we have another one. And that's something that has to be addressed. We have to stop that kind of behavior. But guys, that's all I had for you tonight. I hope everyone has a great evening, a rest of your evening, and a good Friday, and a start of your weekend. Oh yeah, not only was it a daily constant update of the case, but the way they ran, stating that the police didn't have an idea of what they were doing, and how they berated the police and ran down the police. Ken Maines talks about being called to ask to be on the Ashley Banfield show, which he agreed to talk to them about the Idaho case early on. And when she started in bashing the police department, and he was not going to do that, they quickly cut to commercial, and he got a producer come on the phone with him and said, they don't need you anymore. They basically just said, fine, we don't want you on the show. So there are certain narratives that these TV shows want to push, and it's very apparent, and you have to remember that when you're watching the coverage, that just because they're saying it and just because it's all going on doesn't mean they have the scoop, doesn't mean that they know what they're talking about. And like Ken said, when you're bashing the police out there for doing their jobs, until you've done that job. Derek, thank you so much for your super sticker. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Thank you, my dear. If you haven't done this job and you've never been out there investigating a murder before, you don't have the right to criticize, because you have no idea what that job is like. For people to, the way they criticize about the Delphi investigation, we don't know we don't know what has transpired with the Delphi investigation yet. We don't know all the facts. So until we do, we need to judge gently. But it is a broken world. I totally and absolutely agree with you, CJK. Good night, Tech Def. Thank you so much for being here. But yeah, I hope you guys got some good information out of the show tonight. For everyone watching me on the replay, thank you so much. I so appreciate all of you that tune in to listen and to watch. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Good night, everybody.